Let's get one thing straight before the guns come out. The Wild West wasn't some noble, windswept saga of freedom and honor. It was a loud, muddy, lice-infested circus of desperation where bullets solved more problems than lawyers. And morality came in two flavors: loaded or reloading. Outlaws weren't misunderstood rebels or tragic anti-heroes. They were why towns bolted their doors, marshals forgot how to blink, and newspapers ran out of ink. They didn't just break the law, they danced on its grave, emptied your safe, shot your cousin, and stole your horse for the road. Today, we're talking about the 10 deadliest outlaws ever to haunt the American frontier. These were men whose reputations were soaked in gunpowder, and whose careers were measured in body counts. Whether they died in a blaze of glory or dangling from a rope, each one left behind a trail of bodies, a cloud of legend, and at least one regretful bartender. So, let the carnage begin. The Dalton Gang. Body count, 10 plus. 3 brothers, a couple cousins, and enough bad decisions to fill a canyon. The Dalton Gang started their careers on the right side of the law, working as U.S. deputy marshals. But like many frontier men with badges and boredom, they eventually decided it was more profitable to rob banks than protect them. Turns out, justice doesn't pay nearly as well as crime when you have no pension and itchy trigger fingers. Their criminal debut wasn't exactly subtle. They knocked over trains, looted banks, and terrorized towns from Oklahoma to Arkansas, making headlines with every gallop. What they lacked in finesse, they made up for in sheer audacity. One heist in Adair, Indian Territory, involved cutting telegraph wires, blocking streets with stolen wagons, and engaging in a full-on shootout with lawmen in broad daylight. The gang escaped with thousands in loot and zero humility. Their final act came on October 5, 1892, when they tried to rob 2 banks at the same time in Coffeyville, Kansas. It was supposed to be legendary. It was. Just not in the way they planned. The townspeople, armed to the teeth and tired of outlaw nonsense, fought back hard. In under 15 minutes, 4 gang members were dead, and 2 civilians were killed defending their town. Emmett Dalton was shot 23 times but somehow survived. He went to prison, got out, and became a writer in Hollywood. His surviving brother Bill later formed a new gang and died in another gun battle. Bill Doolin. Body count, 20 plus. If the Dalton Gang had a sequel, it would be Bill Doolin's Wild Bunch. Bigger, bolder, and with even more bullets. Doolin started out riding with the Daltons, but when that gang imploded in Coffeyville, he decided to launch his own criminal franchise. And he didn't mess around. His Wild Bunch was like the Avengers of outlawry, collecting the most dangerous and least emotionally stable men in the territory. Their specialties included bank robberies, train stick-ups, and making U.S. Marshals develop ulcers. Between 1892 and 1895, they pulled off more than a dozen major robberies, amassing a fortune that, adjusted for inflation, could probably fund a small nation. They once held up a train near Cimarron, blew open the safe, and vanished into the prairie before lawmen could even saddle up. Doolin wasn't just another trigger-happy thug. He had brains, leadership skills, and oddly enough, manners. Townspeople who met him described him as polite, calm, even friendly, right up until he pulled a gun. He tried to minimize bloodshed during robberies, and he was fiercely loyal to his gang, but that didn't make him any less dangerous. When cornered, he fought like a wild animal. He was finally captured in 1896, but the law couldn't hold him. He escaped from jail, fled to a relative's farm, and tried to disappear. That didn't work. A posse surrounded the house, demanded he come out, and Doolin responded with bullets. The lawmen fired back. When the dust settled, Doolin was dead. His gang scattered. Some were killed, some imprisoned, and a few simply vanished. But for a few bloody years, Doolin's Wild Bunch made Oklahoma feel like the final level of a very violent video game. Clay Allison. Body count, 4 to 15. Clay Allison wasn't your average gunslinger. He was a walking mood swing, with a revolver and a flair for psychological warfare. While most men settled arguments with words, Allison used bullets, axes, and on one occasion, his birthday suit. He once rode through the streets of Mobeetie, Texas, completely naked except for his gun belt, reportedly just to prove a point. What that point was, no one remembers, but it definitely wasn't sanity. In 1870, after a murderer was locked up in jail, Allison led a lynch mob to bust him out. That might have been enough for your average vigilante, but Clay wanted flair. After hanging the man, he decapitated the body and stuck the head on a pole outside a saloon. Townsfolk were horrified. He once invited a man who had threatened to kill him to dinner. Mid-meal, the man reached for his gun. Clay shot him clean between the eyes, then finished his steak. When asked why he accepted the dinner invite, Allison reportedly replied, "I didn't want to send a man to hell on an empty stomach." That's hospitality, outlaw style. Some historians think a head injury from the Civil War turned Clay into a violent eccentric. Others think he was just born with a flair for murder. He was fiercely loyal to his friends, oddly respectful to women, and terrifying to everyone else. He once beat a dentist unconscious with a six-shooter for botching a tooth extraction. Later, he paid the man's medical bills. Clay Allison died at age 45, when he fell from a wagon and broke his neck. A tame end for a man who once pulled teeth with bullets. Cherokee Bill, body count, 8 to 13. His real name was Crawford Goldsby, but history remembers him as Cherokee Bill, a young outlaw with charm, rage, and a complete lack of impulse control. Born in 1876 to a mixed heritage family of African American, Cherokee, and white ancestry, he grew up in Indian territory, where law enforcement was thin and tempers were thick. At just 18, he shot and killed a man for beating up his brother. That might have been his villain origin story, or maybe he just liked killing. From there, things escalated fast. He joined the Cook Gang, a ragtag group of cutthroats, and kicked off a 2-year crime spree that included train robberies, store burglaries, and at least 8 murders. He shot a railroad worker in the face for not moving fast enough. He gunned down a man at a 4th of July dance. When he ran out of targets, he picked new ones. Even in jail, Cherokee Bill refused to behave. During an escape attempt, he smuggled in a pistol and shot a guard. He failed to break out, but succeeded in proving that not even bars could slow him down. He went to trial in Fort Smith, Arkansas, where Judge Isaac Parker, the infamous hanging judge, made quick work of the sentencing. Before his execution in 1896, someone asked him for last words. He scoffed and said, "I came here to die, not to make a speech." And then he did exactly that. His legacy is one of unrelenting violence and wasted potential. Some claimed he had the charisma to be a leader. Instead, he chose bullets over anything resembling a future. Cherokee Bill was the cautionary tale scribbled in blood in the margins. Jim Killer Miller, body count, 12 to 50. He dressed like a gentleman, attended church regularly, and always said his prayers. He also murdered people for money, lots of them, probably while humming a hymn. Miller made a living as a professional killer. He reportedly charged $150 per job, which is about $5,000 today, and operated with the cold efficiency of a bored accountant. His favorite method? Shotgun blasts to the chest. No flair, just results. Some say his kill count reached 50. Others think he inflated the number himself, which tracks, because modesty was never part of his brand. He wore a steel-plated vest under his clothes, making him one of the first recorded outlaws to test bulletproof fashion. It saved his life more than once. He was also infamous for never showing emotion. He could murder a man at point-blank range, then go have pie with his in-laws. He was suspected in the deaths of sheriffs, judges, rivals, and even his own brother-in-law. The only thing more dangerous than crossing Miller was thinking you'd get away with it. In 1909, Miller was finally arrested after assassinating a former U.S. Marshal. But locals didn't trust the courts to hold someone that slippery. A mob broke into the jail, dragged him out, and strung him up alongside 3 other men. Miller, still in his Sunday best, stepped off the box himself and shouted, "Let her rip!" Even in death, he kept the performance going. He wasn't the fastest gun in the West, but he might have been the most efficient, a killer with a business card and a bedtime prayer. Sam Bass. Body count, low but loud. He wasn't the deadliest outlaw by trigger finger, but he might have been the most expensive. Sam Bass was not your standard issue frontier killer. He wasn't fueled by bloodlust or revenge. He was fueled by gambling debts, bad luck, and an almost comical resistance to making smart choices. Born in Indiana and raised on farm chores and boredom, he drifted south, took up cowboy work, and eventually realized that robbing things was easier than herding cattle in the Texas sun. In 1877, Bass and his gang pulled off what was then the biggest train heist in U.S. history. Near Big Springs, Nebraska, they looted a Union Pacific train of $60,000 in freshly minted gold coins, close to $2 million in today's money. It was the kind of score that should have made them disappear forever. But Bass didn't vanish. He just kept going. He robbed more trains, mostly smaller scores, while dodging Pinkerton agents, Texas Rangers, and bounty hunters. His hideouts included caves, barns, and friendly saloons where he allegedly tipped well and smiled often. Despite his rising infamy, townsfolk sometimes helped him escape. Something about his youthful charm, shaggy hair, and crooked smile made him oddly likable. Even some lawmen admitted he was hard to hate. It all ended in Round Rock, Texas. An informant tipped off the Rangers. When Bass and his gang rode in to case a bank, the shootout started before they even hit the hitching post. Bass was mortally wounded, crawled out of town, and was found bleeding in a field. He died 2 days later, reportedly asking if he'd made it to Sunday. He hadn't, but his legend did. Round Rock still holds an annual festival in his honor. The man couldn't dodge bullets, but he did outrun obscurity. Jesse James. Body count, 12 to 20. Jesse James wasn't born an outlaw. He was forged in fire. Specifically, the fires of the Civil War, where he joined Confederate guerrilla units, known for ambushes, executions, and outright massacres. He rode with Quantrill's Raiders and Bloody Bill Anderson, men so violent that the Union Army considered them terrorists, and Jesse was just a teenager. After the war, Jesse and his brother Frank figured peacetime wasn't worth the effort. They formed the James Younger Gang and turned their talents toward robbing banks, trains, stagecoaches, and anything else that held cash. But Jesse wasn't just a criminal. He was a master of self-promotion. He wrote letters to newspapers, spun tales of heroism, and framed himself as a Southern avenger taking revenge on Northern institutions. It worked. People started rooting for him. He hit banks in Missouri, trains in Iowa, and stagecoaches in Texas. In 1876, the gang tried to rob a bank in Northfield, Minnesota. Locals shot back with rifles and rage. Most of the gang was killed or captured. Jesse and Frank escaped. Barely. For 6 more years, Jesse stayed on the run, changing names, growing beards, and planning new robberies. By 1881, he had a price on his head and no one left to trust. He took in a new recruit, Robert Ford, who pretended to be loyal. One morning, as Jesse adjusted a picture on the wall, Ford shot him in the back of the head. The public was furious. Jesse was buried, resurrected in legend, and immortalized in dime novels. To some, he was a rebel hero. To others, a cold-blooded killer with a good publicist. Either way, Jesse didn't fade. He exploded. Billy the Kid. Body count, 8 to 21. Billy the Kid had more aliases than most outlaws had bullets. Born Henry McCarty, later known as William H. Bonney, he spent his youth bouncing between poverty, orphanhood, and minor crimes. By age 15, he was already in jail for stealing food. By 16, he had killed a man. By 21, he was dead. But in between, he built a legend. He became infamous during the Lincoln County War in New Mexico, a bloody feud between rival merchant factions that made modern corporate disputes look like playground arguments. Billy sided with the regulators, a group seeking revenge for the murder of their employer. What followed was a violent soap opera of ambushes, betrayals, and shootouts in dusty saloons and back alleys. Billy wasn't just a participant, he was the breakout star. He escaped jail multiple times, most famously in 1881, when he killed 2 guards, stole a shotgun, and walked out the front door whistling. Newspapers couldn't get enough of him. Women swooned, lawmen seethed. He spoke fluent Spanish, danced at local fiestas, and was described as charming, even polite, until the guns came out. Despite his mythos, Billy the Kid never claimed to be a hero. He was a product of his time, young, reckless, and constantly surrounded by violence. Some said he refused to shoot unarmed men. Others said he laughed while doing it. Historians still argue. He was finally cornered and killed by Sheriff Pat Garrett, a former friend turned bounty hunter. Shot in the dark at Fort Sumner, Billy never saw it coming. Even today, people argue over whether Pat Garrett killed the right man. The kid left a body count and a legend. John Wesley Hardin. Body count 21 to 40 plus. If the Wild West had a valedictorian of violence, it was John Wesley Hardin. He didn't just kill people, he kept score, claimed over 40. Historians can confirm at least 21. And no, he wasn't in a war or a gang. He just had a bad attitude and a faster draw than anyone else in Texas. He killed his first man at 15, a black Union soldier during Reconstruction. Then he went on a spree that included shooting lawmen, gamblers, and men who looked at him funny. One victim allegedly snored too loud in the next room. That was enough. Hardin shot through the wall and went back to sleep. Even for the Wild West, that was excessive. He used cattle drives as cover, posed as a ranch hand, and constantly changed locations to stay ahead of the law. At one point, he escaped capture by unleashing a stampede of longhorns. Because of course he did. He once shot a sheriff in the throat while playing poker. He was caught multiple times, escaped more than once, and finally got a long-term reservation in prison. Hardin served 17 years in Huntsville Penitentiary. While incarcerated, he studied law and claimed to find religion. When released, he opened a law office in El Paso. It lasted about 5 minutes. Old habits returned. So did the insults. One night in a saloon, he mouthed off to a constable named John Selman. Hours later, Selman shot him in the back of the head while he was shooting dice. The jury acquitted Selman. Apparently, everyone just sort of understood. Hardin died the way he lived, loud, fast, and surrounded by people who couldn't wait to see him gone. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Body count 9 to 15. Okay, hear us out. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid weren't the bloodiest outlaws, but they were the most professionally dangerous. As leaders of the Wild Bunch, they masterminded a decade of clean, high-stakes heists across the West. They scouted targets for weeks, staged fresh horses like a getaway relay team, and even had custom leather loot bags. When the law got too close, they fled to South America. In 1908, cornered in Bolivia, they died in a shootout. Or maybe not. To this day, no one's quite sure if the men buried there were actually Butch and Sundance. DNA tests didn't match, which means they may have faked their deaths, come home, and lived out their days as boring rich guys. Butch, born Robert Leroy Parker in Utah, was the charming, talkative strategist. Sundance, real name Harry Longabaugh, was the silent marksman with an icy stare and a fast draw. Together, they built a crew that included names like Kid Curry and LZ Lay, men who could rob a train before breakfast and disappear by sundown. Their signature move? Staging fresh horses along the getaway route, like a relay race with saddles. Between 1896 and 1901, The Wild Bunch pulled off a string of robberies across the West, from Wyoming to New Mexico. One job in Tipton. Wyoming netted them over $50,000 in cash and securities. Pinkertons were hired. Posses were formed. The gang vanished like smoke every time. When the law got too hot, Butch and Sundance fled to South America. They bought a ranch in Argentina and tried to go straight. It lasted about a year. Then came rumors of more robberies in Bolivia, and a final shootout in San Vicente in 1908. 2 bodies were buried. But the identities were never confirmed. DNA tests years later didn't match. Some say they faked their deaths and returned to the US under aliases. Others believe they died with their boots on. Either way, they left behind empty vaults, unanswered questions, and a legend so big it eventually got its own movie. And there you have it. 10 names carved into the blood-soaked myth of the American frontier. Some died in a hail of bullets. Others got a rope and a newspaper headline. A few just disappeared, leaving behind bodies, burned bridges, and a lot of unanswered questions. They weren't trying to live forever, just long enough to get their face on a wanted poster with a number big enough to make bounty hunters nervous. And yet, the West remembers them, not for their morals, but for their velocity. Not for what they stood for, but for how fast they fell. But one thing is certain: the Wild West wasn't built by heroes. It was survived by the ones who reloaded faster,